Part 24. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 231. Tomorrow's dress was delivered yesterday, and Xiao Jinyan kept it in the side hall without even looking at it. Shen Chuwei saw Xiao Jinyan sitting still, neither walking nor sleeping. Your Highness, I have performed well today, haven't you? Xiao Jinyan nodded. Well, if nothing unexpected happens, we can find out the mastermind behind this tomorrow. Shen Chu frowned slightly. Your Highness also performed very well today. Xiao Jinyan was amused. Tomorrow, I will send you a sheep, and you can roast it and eat it. Really, Shen Chuwei hasn't eaten roasted whole lamb for a long time. She ate it with Xiao Jinyan last year. Now that she mentions it, her mouth is watering. Xiao Jinyan chuckled. When has I ever lied to you? Shen Chu slightly raised his eyebrows and said, I have a whole roasted lamb to eat tomorrow. Your Highness, do you want to eat together tomorrow? I don't use spicy food. Xiao Jinyan's eyes paused and he pursed his lips tightly. After Shen Chuwei said that, she felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. It was at this time that she remembered that tomorrow was the big day for the appointment of the crown princess. She would be very busy and would not have time to eat roasted whole lamb. His Royal Highness is busy with official duties every day. When you want to eat, I will ask Chengzi to bake it for you. Shen Chuwei tried to ease the awkward atmosphere. Xiao Jinyan nodded in agreement. Well, you should rest early. Yes. Shen Chuwei took the soft pillow behind him, lay on the bed, pulled the quilt, and was about to close his eyes, but saw Xiao Jinyan sitting still. Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan stood up, covered her with the quilt again, stared at her for a while. Go to sleep. After saying that, he stood up straight and walked out. Shen Chuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan's leaving figure. It wasn't until she heard the door closing that she looked away and closed her eyes to sleep. After Xiao Jinyan returned to the palace, he went directly to the study. Because he couldn't sleep, he planned to get to the bottom of the matter overnight to avoid harming others in the future. Lu 11 worked very quickly and soon found out the details about Dr. Zhao. Xiao Jinyan asked, how was the investigation? Your Highness, Imperial Physician Zhao was originally a doctor on Chang'an Street. He had 2 elders, a wife, and children at home. He was recommended by regular bachelors to work in Tai Hospital. He has been serving for more than a year. Among them, Dr. Zhao's mother is the nanny of Bachelor Chang. Chang Sushi is the second brother of Chang Liangdi and the second son of General Chang De. Immediately, Lu 11 took out another purse and handed it to Xiao Jinyan. Your Highness, this was found from Dr. Zhao. Xiao Jinyan took it and took a look. It was just an ordinary purse. It was quite heavy when weighed. After opening it and pouring out the contents, he found 3 gold bars. He seemed to have guessed something. He ordered, go to the prison. Here Lu 11 responded, holding a lantern and leading the way. At this time, it was already the 2nd watch, and the entire palace was shrouded in darkness. Lu 11 led the way to Tianlao. Wei Qi guarded Imperial Dr. Zhao every step of the way, just in case. Wei Qi raised his head when he heard the noise and saw His Highness coming. He stood up quickly, bowed and saluted, Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan stood outside the cell door in a black brocade robe, looking at Dr. Zhao inside. Dr. Zhao was currently tied up with a rag in his mouth. Wei Qi has always been straightforward and prudent in his work. He asked, did he confess? Wei Qi shook his head, Your Highness, no. At this time, Imperial Dr. Zhao was already exhausted. Although he was tied up by Wu Huadida and faced with imminent disaster, he still couldn't resist his sleepiness and fell asleep leaning against the wall. Xiao Jinyan ordered coldly, wake him up. I obey. Wei Qi came to the corner, picked up a bucket of cold water from the ground, opened the cell door, raised the bucket and poured it on Dr. Zhao's head. The cold water poured down on his head and face, stimulating Dr. Zhao to wake up instantly. Xiao Jinyan waited for a while, and when Dr. Zhao raised his head, he asked sternly, "I have already investigated. You have a close relationship with the Chang family. The mastermind behind the scenes is Chang Liangdi." The last three words were spoken after careful consideration. There may be some prejudice, but Chang Liangdi is the most suspicious. The Chang family and Dr. Zhao had a chance to meet each other, and it was very possible that they could work for Chang Liangdi. "Your Highness, this is really the fault of this humble minister alone and has nothing to do with anyone else." Dr. Zhao originally wanted to hold on, but after all, there was no evidence to prove that it was related to Chang Liangdi. But just as he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Xiao Jinyan's cold voice, "You still refuse to tell the truth now? Do you want me to invite all your family members here and question them one by one?" Without waiting for Dr. Zhao to refute, Xiao Jinyan took out the purse again and showed it to Dr. Zhao. "You should know this, right?" Imperial Dr. Zhao recognized at a glance that it was the gold bar rewarded by Chang Liangdi, and his whole body went limp. Finally, Dr. Zhao confessed the whole story one by one. Imperial Dr. Zhao was able to take up the post in the palace only because of Chang Sushi's blessing. In addition, Chang Huilin would soon enter the East Palace and needed help from acquaintances, so Imperial Physician was indispensable. Otherwise, Bachelor Chang would not recommend him casually. After Zhao Yuyi and Chang Huilin entered the palace one after another, they have always been in contact. A few days ago, concubine Su was inquiring about the prescription for a child, and Imperial Dr. Zhao happened to hear it. After informing Chang Liangdi, she gave concubine Su a fake prescription, with the purpose of overthrowing concubine Su. Xiao Jinyan looked at the confession and realized that he had spent the whole night dealing with the matter. The truth of the matter had come to light. Not only that, the issue of establishing a crown princess had also been resolved. The position of Crown Princess Chang Liangdi is untouchable. It was already the fourth watch of the night. Xiao Jinyan did not rush to find Chang Liangdi to settle the score. Instead, he returned to the palace and planned to have a good rest and make the matter public tomorrow morning. At the fifth watch of the night, Chang Liangdi was soaking in the bathtub at this time. The bathtub was not only filled with fresh flower petals, but also precious essential oils. She was served by the maids while talking about the etiquette of the canonization. Chang Liangdi listened quietly. Although she was a little sleepy at this time, she immediately became energetic and her eyes were full of expectations when she thought of the canonization ceremony in an hour. After bathing, there were various skincare and dresses. The dresses were complicated, layer by layer, and very particular. After dressing up, it was makeup, which was also particular, and all of these needed to be done by the old maids in the palace. Chang Liangdi sat in front of the dressing table, watching the maids busy with her hair and wearing the dragon and phoenix hairpin that only the crown princess could wear, and her eyes were filled with joy that could not be concealed. Finally, under the skillful hands of the maids, the dignified and elegant makeup was completed. She walked out with the maids supporting her. At the entrance of the enthronement ceremony, except for the MC of the Guard of Honor, no one saw His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. "It's already this hour, why hasn't His Royal Highness come yet? Didn't he prepare in advance? Go and see what happened. It will be bad if you miss the auspicious time." Everyone talked about it and looked worried. Chang Liangdi looked in the direction of the Crown Prince's bedroom, but didn't see Xiao Jinyan, so she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Could it be that Xiao Jinyan stayed in the Hehuan Palace last night? "Good night, my dears. It's Monday, a new beginning. I'm begging for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets by being queued. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 232. In Chang Liangdi's eyes, Xiao Jinyan was not the kind of person who ignored etiquette and rules. Even if Xiao Jinyan didn't want to be the crown princess, she would still joke about the face of the royal family. The emperor and the queen were waiting in the golden palace, and Xiao Jinyan didn't dare to do anything that violated the emperor's order. Xiao Jinyan must have been delayed by something, so he was late. Chang Liangdi comforted herself like this. At this time, the prince's bedroom. Eunuch De and Eunuch Li were both old people in the palace. As early as 5 o'clock in the morning, they urged the prince to get up early, but they were stopped by Lu 11. Your Highness handled the case overnight and was so busy that he didn't even have time to drink water. He just took a short rest. Eunuchs, wait. This is not something that can't be waited for. Today is the big day for the crown princess to be enthroned. It's not good to miss the auspicious time. At this time, Xiao Jinyan walked out and glanced at the group of people in the yard, almost all of whom were from the Ministry of Rites. He was calm and composed. I have nothing to do. I will go after I pack up. Eunuch De said in a somewhat anxious voice, Your Highness, let's help you bathe and change clothes first. It will be too late if we are late. No need. Xiao Jinyan said this and turned to walk in. The people in the yard were stunned. Eunuch De was stunned for a long time before he reacted. What does Your Highness want to do? Eunuch Li was so anxious that he shouted, Your Highness, today is a very important day. You can't be careless. Your Highness, the Emperor, the Empress, and all the civil and military officials are waiting. Your Highness should think twice. Lu 11 said with a kind smile, Your Highness is the Crown Prince. You still know what is important. Everyone, please be patient. Eunuch De Li's face turned red with anxiety. It's urgent, how can you be patient? Xiao Jinyan walked out of the inner room in a black court dress, glanced at Eunuch Li and the others. Let's go. After that, he strode out first. Lu 11 followed closely behind with a whisk in his hand. Eunuch De, Eunuch Li and others looked at each other and didn't react for a long time. Why is Your Highness wearing court clothes? The Emperor and the Queen also noticed something was wrong. The Emperor turned his head and asked the Queen in a low voice, The auspicious time has arrived, why is there no movement at all? Your Majesty, wait and see. The Queen was also puzzled, looking outside the palace from time to time. On such an important day, the prince could not be perfunctory. Qing Ying took anxious small steps and walked over hurriedly, whispering in the Queen's ear, Queen, the prince has not arrived yet, and Chang Liangdi is standing there waiting alone. The Queen frowned, What's going on? I don't know either, someone has already gone to the prince's bedroom, Qing Ying said. The Queen thought for a moment, then turned to look at the Emperor, Your Majesty, the prince must have been delayed by something. The Emperor said unhappily, Such an important day, why don't you handle it in advance? The most embarrassed person was Chang Liangdi, who had been waiting there before dawn, and the sun was rising. It was a clear and sunny day. Chang Liangdi felt cold all over, and Xiao Jinyan must have done this to embarrass her. She clasped her hands tightly together, fearing that she could not bear the strange eyes. Until she saw Xiao Jinyan walking towards her from a distance, her fingers loosened, and her heart relaxed. She curled her lips slightly, and finally came. I knew you would not dare not come on such an important day. Someone with sharp eyes found that there was something wrong with Xiao Jinyan's dress. Your Highness, why aren't you wearing a formal dress? That's right. How can you not wear a formal dress on such an important day? When Xiao Jinyan approached, Chang Liangdi realized that Xiao Jinyan was not wearing a formal dress, and her eyes were full of doubts. She looked at Xiao Jinyan with her delicate makeup, and her beautiful eyes contained hidden grievances. Your Highness, are you delayed by something? Xiao Jinyan looked at Chang Liangdi, who was dressed up, and said in a cold voice, Indeed, something delayed me, otherwise I wouldn't know that Chang Liangdi is not worthy of the position of crown princess. Chang Liangdi's face looked a little bad. She tried her best to restrain her demeanor and asked, Your Highness, what do you mean by this? If you don't want others to know, don't do it yourself. After Xiao Jinyan left the cold words, he strode towards the golden palace. Chang Liangdi was stunned on the spot. The auspicious time had passed, and the emperor and the queen were impatient. Eunuch Li came in trotting to report, "Your Majesty, the crown prince is here." The emperor said angrily, "He still has the nerve to come. On such an important day, he, the crown prince, can also cause trouble. In my opinion, he is not worthy of being the crown prince." At this time, Xiao Jinyan walked in and stepped forward to salute, "Your son pays respects to your father and mother." The emperor was already angry, and he became even angrier when he saw the crown prince wearing court clothes. "Crown prince, do you know what day it is today? Why are you still wearing court clothes? And you came into the palace alone." Xiao Jinyan said word by word, "Father, Chang Liangdi has bad behavior, is very jealous, and colluded with the imperial physician to frame concubine Su and Shen Liangdi. She is not worthy of being the crown princess." The emperor and the queen were both stunned. The emperor said in a deep voice, "Prince, everything requires evidence, don't talk nonsense." Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded, "Your son did not sleep last night, and investigated this matter thoroughly. There are all kinds of evidence and witnesses, and Chang Liangdi has not been wronged." The emperor and the queen looked at each other. This was a matter of the inner palace. After exchanging glances, the emperor ordered, "The ceremony of the crown princess will be postponed, and another auspicious day will be chosen." After Eunuch Li read out the emperor's intention, all the civil and military officials were in an uproar, and they didn't know what had happened. Until Chang Liangdi heard the news, her legs went weak. If it weren't for the two maids on her left and right supporting her, she would have fallen to the ground. She looked at the Jinluan palace not far away in disbelief. It was clearly a done deal, so why postpone it? Why? Just when Chang Liangdi was puzzled, Qing Ying came over. "Chang Liangdi, please follow me to Fenji Palace." Chang Liangdi saw Madame Qing Ying. She had always been close to Madame Qing Ying since she was a child. When she met her, she couldn't control her emotions. "Madame Qing Ying, isn't today the auspicious day chosen by Lord Lu? Why postpone it?" Qing Ying sighed helplessly, as if she was regretful. "Chang Liangdi, you will know when you get to Fenji Palace." Chang Liangdi's body went weak, but she thought that the queen and her mother's family would support her, so there shouldn't be any problems. Chang Liangdi comforted herself in her heart. Fenji Palace. The emperor sat on the throne, and the queen sat on the chair on the right. Xiao Jinyan stood tall in the center of the hall. Chang Liangdi was still wearing a formal dress. Because the dress was heavy, she was supported by two maids to walk in. As soon as she stepped in, Chang Liangdi found that the atmosphere in the hall was a little strange. She walked in carefully and bowed, "Your Majesty, I pay my respects to the emperor and the queen." The emperor looked at Chang Liangdi in a formal dress, the most eye-catching in the hall. He said in a deep voice, "Chang Liangdi, the prince said that you are scheming, jealous, colluding with the imperial doctor, and framing concubine Su and Shen Liangdi for a fake pregnancy. Is this true? Good evening, my dears. Acting cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 233. When Chang Liangdi heard this, she realized why the ceremony of instituting the crown princess was postponed. It was fine yesterday. How could it be exposed in just one night? It's impossible. It must be Xiao Jinyan's deliberate excuse to prevent herself from becoming the princess. She raised her head and looked at the emperor, and replied cautiously, "Your Majesty, I have never behaved like this as a jealous woman." Then, She looked at Xiao Jinyan and said with an aggrieved face, "Your Highness, I know that you don't like me, and you feel that I have usurped the position of Crown Princess Shenliangdi." As she spoke, she raised her handkerchief and choked with sobs. "Your Highness likes Shenliangdi, and I am willing to give up the position of Crown Princess to Shenliangdi. I only ask that your Highness will not unjustly accuse me of appointing the Crown Princess." Chang Liangdi burst into tears when she spoke, which made people moved. The emperor's eyes were gloomy. "Prince, is what Chang Liangdi said the truth?" The queen looked a little distressed. She looked at Xiao Jinyan and said, "I don't believe Chang Liangdi can do such a thing. Did the prince make a mistake?" Xiao Jinyan looked at Chang Liangdi, disgusted with her pretending to be innocent. "Chang Liangdi, you are deep-minded, jealous, and calculating. At this time, you don't admit it, and you still want to frame me and Shen Liangdi." After Xiao Jinyan finished speaking, he raised his eyes and looked at the emperor and queen on the throne. "Father, emperor, mother, and I have evidence." As he spoke, he took out the confession from his arms and presented it with both hands. Eunuch Li came over, took the confession from Xiao Jinyan's hand, turned around and presented it to the emperor with both hands. The emperor picked up the confession, spread it out, and looked down at the confession. Xiao Jinyan said again, "The witness is outside." The emperor looked unhappy after reading it, and then handed the confession to the queen. "Queen, take a look." The queen saw that the emperor's face was not good looking, so she took it over and took a look at it. The emperor looked at Xiao Jinyan and ordered, "Bring in the witnesses." Xiao Jinyan ordered his subordinates to bring in Dr. Zhao. Wei Qi held Imperial Dr. Zhao in one hand and easily slipped Imperial Dr. Zhao in. Imperial Dr. Zhao knelt in the center of the hall, trembling with fear. When Chang Liangdi saw Imperial Dr. Zhao, her persistence was gone. Her legs gave out and she fell to the ground, knowing that she was finished this time. Imperial Dr. Zhao trembled and saluted, "The guilty minister will see you, the emperor, and you will see the empress." The emperor glanced at Chang Liangdi and knew what was going on. He looked gloomily and asked sternly, "Is the evidence in the confession true?" Imperial Dr. Zhao crawled on the ground and said in a trembling voice, "Go back to the emperor, everything is true." The queen also finished reading the confession at this time and looked at Chang Liangdi in disbelief. "Lan'er, why did you do this?" When Chang Liangdi knew what had happened, she immediately burst into tears. "Empress, I know I made a mistake, and I had no choice but to do so. Your Highness has never stayed overnight in Zinlan Palace, and I don't know what I did wrong. Let your Highness, I am so bored, I am so obsessed with this." As he spoke, he knelt on the ground and shrugged his shoulders from crying. Xiao Jinyan said coldly, "This is not the reason for you to frame concubine Su and Shen Liangdi. If I hadn't discovered it in time yesterday and informed my father and mother about Shen Liangdi's happiness, wouldn't it have been a waste of time for them to rejoice? Let Shen Liangdi bear the lie. The crime of fighting over pregnancy. The queen has been looking forward to the prince allowing her to have a grandson as soon as possible. If she had learned yesterday that Shen Liangdi was happy, she would have been even happier than Chang Liangdi becoming the princess. However, as happy as I am, I will be disappointed today. Therefore, the prince is right, he would rather have nothing than rejoice in vain." The emperor was also very disappointed with Chang Liangdi, because Chang Liangdi was the queen's niece, the sister of Chang Sushi, and the legitimate daughter of General Chang, so he left the matter to the queen. "Queen, just watch and deal with it. I still have things to deal with, so I'll take the first step." The emperor patted the queen on the shoulder and left gracefully. The queen looked at the emperor's handsome back with a cold face and couldn't help but cursed, "The dog emperor knows how to push the troublesome and difficult things to me, and the things that offend others. To put it nicely, leave it to me to handle everything poo. Dog emperor, I believe you." Xiao Jinyan. Although I heard my mother calling my father a dog emperor many times, I was still a little surprised. The first time he heard his mother calling his father Emperor Dog, he was stunned. He couldn't imagine that such vulgar and insulting words were his mother's inner thoughts. It is also difficult to be a queen. Although Chang Liangdi did something wrong, she is still her own niece and cannot be punished too severely. Otherwise, her brothers will be unhappy and her father will be unhappy, which will not be a good thing for herself or the royal family. The punishment cannot be light, otherwise it will be difficult to convince the public. When the queen thought of this, she couldn't help but cursed the dog emperor. In the end, the queen punished Chang Liangdi, demoting her to Liangyuan, detaining her for 1 month, and punishing her by copying the Diamond Sutra to meditate, and deducting the month from her service for 3 months. For Chang Liangdi, the punishment was already severe. Chang Liangdi was unwilling to lose her position as the crown princess, but when she looked up and saw the disappointment in the queen's eyes, she pursed her lips and said nothing. Xiun Pavilion. Yesterday, Xiao Jinyan asked Lu 11 to send a sheep to the Hehuan Hall from the imperial kitchen. The imperial dining room worked quickly and delivered it in the morning. Lu 11 had a kind smile on his face and asked, Shen Liangdi, this sheep is very fat. It was selected by the Xie family personally. Are you satisfied with it? Shen Shuwei looked at the one held by the little eunuch and knew that it was very novel to catch and kill him. Xiao Jinyan didn't lie to her. Eunuch Lu has a very good taste. I am very satisfied. When it is baked, I will give you some to try. Shen Liangdi, you're welcome. The Xie family has gone back to resume their duties, Lu 11 said, but he was actually quite greedy. He almost drooled at the smell of roasted lamb last year. After Lu 11 left, Shen Chu turned slightly and looked at Chun 11, let's season and marinate it first. It's all roasted. We'll have roasted whole lamb for lunch. OK, Chungzi was also craving for roasted whole lamb, and was a little excited to see such a big whole lamb. Chungzi has learned 90% of the art of seasoning and marinating. With the help of the little rabbit, the sheep was washed again and then put into a large wooden basin for marinating. Shen Chuwei was sitting on a wicker chair nearby, watching Chungzi busy at work, and picked up a novel to pass the time. This novel was lent to concubine Su a few days ago and was just returned yesterday. Shen Chuwei read a few chapters and suddenly discovered where Su Fangfia learned the action of slapping her thigh. She originally learned it from reading this novel. There are several plots in it, all of which involve slapping the thigh to express excitement. Not only that, concubine Su was originally very interested in Xiao Jinyan, and she would always say something about wanting to sleep with her. After reading several novels, concubine Su rarely mentioned Xiao Jinyan. Did she mislead concubine Su? Chungzi roasted a whole lamb for the second time and built a fire with the help of the little rabbit. After roasting for an hour, the aroma spreads far and wide. Shen Chu smelled the fragrance and stopped reading. He looked at the roast mutton on the shelf and his mouth was almost watering. Hey guys, there will be an update at midnight. Act like a coquettish girl and beg for votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 234. Chungzi, it's ready. Send some to Prince Yu. Shen Chuwei thought for a moment and said, send some to concubine Su and Tao Chenjui, and some to Xiun Pavilion, so that they can have a taste. Send some to Eunuch Lu as well. Chungzi looked up at Shen Chuwei and found that the young lady was very generous today. Even though the roasted whole lamb was very big, there wasn't much left after giving some here and there. The young lady was happy, so as a servant, she couldn't say much. Shen Chuwei stared at the roasted whole lamb in Chungzi's hand, which was golden on both sides. She couldn't bear to look away. She licked her lips and urged, Chungzi, it's cooked and ready to eat. My lady, the roasted whole lamb can't run away. Please wait a little longer and let it cool down for a while, Chungzi said, and raised her head to see His Highness standing not far away. She blurted out in surprise, Your Highness. Shen Shui's eyes stayed on the roasted whole lamb, and she said without raising her head, "Today is an important day for the appointment of the crown princess. Your Highness has no time to come." Xiao Jinyan stood less than 2 meters away from Shen Shui, watching Shen Shui lying on the rattan chair. Even if he couldn't see her front, he could guess that her eyes must be looking at the roasted whole lamb. Chengzi saw Shen Shui sitting still, and hurriedly winked at her, "My lady, His Highness is really here." Shen Shui saw Chengzi standing still, and raised her head in confusion and saw Chengzi's eyes twitching. "Chengzi, are your eyes cramping?" "Chengzi. Oh my God. My lady, how do my eyes look like they are cramping?" Shen Shui found that the atmosphere was a little strange. Chengzi and Xiaotoza stood up and bowed behind her. She asked Chengzi in a very low voice, "Is your Highness really here?" Chengzi wanted to roll her eyes. "You can find out if you look back." Xiao Jinyan coughed lightly, "Xiaju." Shen Shui looked back and saw Xiao Jinyan standing less than 2 meters behind her in a black court dress. She was stunned for a moment. "Your Highness, isn't it the day to appoint the crown princess today, so, how could he appear in the Hehuan palace?" Xiao Jinyan answered concisely, "Cancelled." "Cancelled." Shen Shui didn't react for a long time. Last night, she heard that the Ministry of Rites was preparing intensively. Now it was cancelled. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the roasted whole lamb, and looked at Shen Shui again. "I haven't had breakfast yet. I was busy until the 4th watch last night, and got up at the 5th watch. I didn't have time to have breakfast, so I went to the Jinluan Palace to expose Chang Liangdi. At this moment, I was really hungry." Shen Shui got down from the rattan chair neatly, took 2 steps forward, and pulled Xiao Jinyan's sleeve and said, "Your Highness, the roasted whole lamb is ready. It's just right to eat roasted whole lamb together." Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at the hand that always pulled his sleeve. He stretched out his hand and held it in his palm. "Okay." Shen Shui looked down at the hand being held, and his palm was very hot. The two sat down at the table one after another. The sauce and lettuce were already prepared on the round table. Chengzi had already started to cut the roasted whole lamb with a knife. According to Shen Shui's instructions, he gave some to them and sent them over. Then he sliced it. Shen Shui picked up the disposable gloves she had prepared in advance, raised her eyes and looked at Xiao Jinyan. "Your Highness, please stretch out your hand, I will put on the gloves for you." Xiao Jinyan stretched out her upper hand as she was told, and watched Shen Shui put on the disposable transparent gloves on her hand, and then rolled up his sleeves, rolled them up very high, revealing a large section of his white wrist. After putting on both hands, Shen Shui rolled up his sleeves, picked up the gloves and put them on himself with familiarity. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shui's actions indifferently, and it could be seen from her proficiency that she had worn disposable transparent gloves many times before. Shen Shui picked up a piece of roasted lamb with a little greed, and put it directly into her mouth without wrapping it with lettuce and ate it. Seeing Xiao Jinyan looking at her and not eating, she puffed her cheeks and said, "Your Highness, eat it while it's hot, it won't taste good if it's cold." Xiao Jinyan looked at her greedy appearance and nodded, "Yeah. Shen Liangdi, I have good news for you. Chang Liangdi not only didn't become the crown princess, but was demoted to Liang Yuan." Concubine Su swung her handkerchief, and her voice came before she arrived. When she came in and saw Xiao Jinyan was there, the remaining two choked back their throats. After hearing the news, Concubine Su rushed over as soon as possible, thinking that she came fast enough, but she didn't expect Xiao Jinyan to come faster than her. Xiao Jinyan and Shen Shui turned around almost at the same time, and saw Concubine Su swung her handkerchief and walked in quickly, and suddenly stepped on the brakes. Without asking, they knew it was because of Xiao Jinyan. In front of Xiao Jinyan, Concubine Su was so gloating that she died on the spot. She swung her handkerchief awkwardly and bowed, "Your Highness, May you be blessed with good health. Xiao Jinyan said lightly, get up. Shen Shuwei still had roasted lamb in her mouth, and said vaguely, since concubine Su is here, let's eat roasted whole lamb together, so as not to have someone send it. Concubine Su glanced at Xiao Jinyan, and when she saw that he didn't say anything, she agreed, okay. She came to the round table and sat down, put away the handkerchief, and consciously picked up the disposable transparent gloves and put them on her hands. Xiao Jinyan glanced at concubine Su, and saw that she was familiar with her movements. It didn't seem like it was her first time. She came to visit often. Su came to visit many times and had eaten for free many times, so she was already familiar with wearing gloves. Concubine Su put on her gloves, looked at the roasted lamb, and then looked at Xiao Jinyan, and felt a little complaining in her heart. His Highness came at any other time, but when he was eating, it was difficult for me to show my skills. Xiao Jinyan had just rolled up a piece of mutton when she heard concubine Su complaining. Since the first day concubine Su entered the East Palace, she had been complaining about this or that, and she was particularly good at scolding people. Xiao Jinyan was actually used to concubine Su scolding people, and sometimes she was telling the truth. But this time, he found that concubine Su still complained that he shouldn't have come. It was concubine Su's first time eating mutton. She followed Shen Shuwei's example, picked up a piece of lettuce, put it on 2 pieces of mutton, and then spread some hot sauce, rolled it up and put it in her mouth. For a moment, she forgot that Xiao Jinyan was there, and she took a big bite. When she put it in her mouth, she saw Xiao Jinyan sitting next to her. It was not right to eat the mutton in her mouth, and it was not right not to eat it. She couldn't help but complain in her heart again. There was a sentence in the book that was absolutely correct, that men would only affect the speed of eating. Xiao Jinyan paused chewing and glanced at concubine Su. She lowered her head, and her cheeks kept moving. It was obvious that she had stuffed a lot in her mouth. She lowered her head probably because she was afraid of being seen. He remembered that in order to look dignified and elegant, concubine Su used to eat in small bites. Men affect the speed of eating? Xiao Jinyan turned his head to look at Shen Shuwei. She was taking a big bite of mutton with her cheeks bulging. She was eating happily. He suddenly understood why concubine Su looked familiar when eating, because she looked a bit like Shen Shuwei. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 235. Chapter 235 The Prince of Sweet Pastry is disliked. Xiao Jinyan ate the mutton with doubts, and then heard concubine Su's inner thoughts. It's not convenient for His Highness to be here at all. He can't eat well, he's sitting in the middle, and he can't chat casually with Shen Shuwei. Why? Xiao Jinyan. Am I redundant? He glanced at concubine Su coldly, you are the redundant one. Concubine Su felt an inexplicable chill on her back. She raised her head in confusion. It was not windy today. Shen Shuwei was enjoying her meal when her legs suddenly sank. She looked down and saw Xue Tuan looking up at her. In those blue eyes, there were only 3 words, I want to eat. Shen Shuwei was not stingy with the snow dumplings either. He picked up a piece of mutton and fed it to the snow dumplings. After eating the roasted whole lamb, concubine Su took out her handkerchief and wiped her mouth. She looked up at Xiao Jinyan and found that he was drinking tea from a teacup. I thought, I've finished eating, why doesn't His Highness leave? I still want to whisper to Shen Shuwei. What a hindrance Your Highness is here. Xiao Jinyan paused while drinking tea and glanced coldly at concubine Su. You can leave now that you've finished eating. Then I heard concubine Su say, Your Highness is really so busy, you can't even see a ghost, why are you so free now? Could it be that the Emperor's errands were too few? The Emperor is also the one who should give more instructions to His Highness to do more things and practice more. Xiao Jinyan took 2 sips of tea to calm down his rising blood pressure. I am so busy every day that I come to Hehuan Hall to take a break from my busy schedule. You actually said he was too idle? Shen Shuwei drank tea to relieve the greasiness. He let out a puzzled sigh in his heart and found that concubine Su, who usually kept talking when she came to Hehuan Hall, was especially quiet today. It was probably because of Xiao Jinyan's presence that concubine Su remained silent. But what Shen Shuwei didn't know was that concubine Su didn't say anything in her mouth, but she never stopped in her heart, and the target of her complaints was Xiao Jinyan. No one would believe it. When Xiao Jinyan heard Shen Shuwei's words, he looked down and saw Suichuan eating mutton. No wonder he suddenly heard what Shen Shuwei was thinking. Xiao Jinyan also knew at this time that concubine Su was always a talker every time she came to Hehuan Hall. Xiao Jinyan took a sip of tea and said calmly, "Concubine Su, do you want to do something?" The meaning of driving people away is obvious. Concubine Su didn't think much about it. She thought that she was in Hehuan Hall, not the prince's palace, and she wouldn't be in the way of anyone. "Your Highness, I have nothing to do." Xiao Jinyan had a sullen face. Shen Shuwei fed Xuetuan another piece of mutton, raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, feeling that something was wrong in the atmosphere today. Concubine Su picked up the teacup, took a sip of tea, and suddenly asked, "Your Highness, aren't you busy?" "Don't worry, Shen Liangdi will have no one to accompany you. I can just chat with Shen Liangdi." I couldn't help shouting in my heart, "Your Highness, please go get busy." Xiao Jinyan was kicked out for the first time, and he was still in Hehuan Hall, so he naturally felt a little unhappy. Shen Chu petted the cat for a moment, and felt an undercurrent surging inexplicably, and he might be in danger of being affected if he wasn't careful. In the end, Lu 11 called Xiao Jinyan away. The moment Xiao Jinyan stood up, I heard concubine Su cheering. His Highness was finally gone, and I could finally chat casually with Shen Shuwei, haha. Before Xiao Jinyan left, he glanced at concubine Su coldly, and then walked out of Hehuan Hall. Concubine Su lowered her head and did not notice Xiao Jinyan's extremely impatient expression on her. Anyway, she was very happy at the moment. She grabbed Shen Shuwei's hand excitedly and said, "His Highness finally left. I thought he was going to hang on." Xiao Jinyan, who had just walked to the door, still heard it and walked out of Hehuan Hall with a sullen face. Shen Shuwei looked at concubine Su, who was a little overly excited with confusion. "What's wrong? So excited?" "Of course I'm excited." Concubine Su's voice already explained how excited she was at this moment. Chang Liangdi was not treated as the crown princess, and she was demoted to Liang Yuan, which is 2 levels lower than me. How can I not be excited? Shen Shuwei was confused. She only knew that the appointment of the crown princess had been cancelled. What the hell is going on? Concubine Su said with emotion, "Shen Liangdi, I find you are a lucky star." Shen Shuwei was even more confused. "Can you focus on the key points? How did I become a lucky star?" Concubine Su's voice was still extremely excited. "Didn't you say yesterday that you wanted Dr. Zhao to diagnose your pulse? Do you know who ordered Dr. Zhao?" Without waiting for Shen Shuwei's reply, Concubine Su said, "It was Chang Liangdi who did it. If it hadn't been for your suggestion yesterday, Your Highness would not have been able to find out the truth, and Chang Liangdi would have successfully become the crown princess." After Concubine Su finished speaking, she smiled proudly and said, "Didn't I look so domineering before? Let's see how I fight against her in the future." Shen Shuwei knew the reason for Concubine Su's excitement. It was probably because Chang Liangdi couldn't climb on Concubine Su's head, so Concubine Su could attack her without any scruples. No wonder Concubine Su couldn't help it once Xiao Jinyan left. After Xiao Jinyan finished handling the matter, "Ask Lu 11 to call Lu Zaiyan over." Lu Zaiyan also saw the famous scene today. Chang Liangdi can't be the crown prince, so Xiao Jinyan should be in a good mood at the moment. When he approached the study room, he saw Xiao Jinyan. As he expected, Xiao Jinyan's eyebrows relaxed and he could tell he was in a good mood. Lu Zaiyan stepped forward and bowed, "Your Highness, why did you call me here?" Xiao Jinyan snorted coldly, "I think your position as the Qintian supervisor is no longer guaranteed." Lu Zaiyan looked confused, "What do you mean, Your Highness?" Xiao Jinyan said, "It is hard to predict who the crown princess will be. Do you think you can keep your position as the director of the Imperial Observatory?" Lu Zaiyan smiled and said, "Your Highness has misunderstood. Didn't I tell you that you don't need to stop it by force? Everything is predetermined by fate." Xiao Jinyan immediately heard the hidden meaning in his words and raised his eyebrows, "So, you knew that the ceremony of enthroning the crown princess could not be held?" Lu Zaiyan smiled awkwardly, "I calculated it a little, which also shows that Chang Liangdi is not the destined person for your highness." Xiao Jinyan asked coldly, "Why don't you say it?" Lu Zaiyan explained, "Your highness, sometimes speaking out can be counterproductive." Xiao Jinyan pondered for a while. If Lu Zaiyan had said it in advance, he would not be in a hurry, and he would not have stayed up all night to investigate the case of fake pregnancy to win favor. Then he might miss the opportunity, which is equivalent to missing the opportunity to expose Chang Liangdi's crime. After Xiao Jinyan figured it out, he stopped embarrassing Lu Zaiyan, "You have some truth in what you said." This time, thanks to Xiaju, it was she who decided to let Zhao Yi come to check his pulse yesterday, which led to a series of chain reactions. Lu Zaiyan was a little proud, because he deliberately didn't make it very clear that day. He suddenly remembered something, "By the way, Your Highness, I want to take a look at Shen Liangdi's palm." Because he didn't see it clearly last time, he has always been curious whether Shen Chuwei is Xiao Jinyan's destined person. "Good night, my dears. Being cute and coquettish, I'm asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 236. Xiao Jinyan remembered that Lu Zaiyan had held Xiaju's hand last time, and now he wanted to read Xiaju's palm. "Come here." His voice was a little deep. Lu Zaiyan didn't doubt him, took 2 steps forward and put his ear close, only to hear Xiao Jinyan say one word in a friendly way, "Get lost." Okay. Lu Zaiyan turned around and left subconsciously, and when he reached the door, he found something wrong. Why did His Highness want to get lost? He walked back with doubts, and his eyes were very serious when he looked at Xiao Jinyan, "Your Highness, I am serious." Xiao Jinyan threw him a sentence directly, "I am serious too." Lu Zaiyan left the study with a sad face. When he met Wei Qi when he went out, he sighed deeply. Wei Qi was very familiar with Lu Zaiyan, and seeing him sigh, he naturally asked, "Lord Lu, what's wrong?" Lu Zaiyan was a little sad, "Your Highness wants me to get lost." Wei Qi smiled and didn't take it seriously, "Isn't this a very normal thing?" "You don't understand." Lu Zaiyan sighed, turned his head and wanted to leave. Wei Qi held Lu Zaiyan's shoulder and comforted him, "You must have said something that made His Highness unhappy. Just don't say it next time." "Lu Zaiyan, are you comforting or blaming me?" he asked with a warm smile. "Brother Wei, how about I tell you about your marriage?" Wei Qi held out his hand generously, "Okay, tell me when I can get married and have children. My specialty is to tell me about marriage, don't worry." Lu Zaiyan lowered his eyes and looked at the lines on Wei Qai's palm. The more he looked, the deeper his frown became. Wei Qi asked in confusion, "Lord Lu, how is it? I have a wife, but..." Lu Zaiyan hesitated. Wei Qi asked, "But what?" Lu Zaiyan said with difficulty, "Maybe I will never have children." Wei Qi was stunned. Subconsciously, he thought he couldn't do it. Asterisk. Changzi thought that the new clothes should be ready, so he took the time to go to the clothing bureau. Unfortunately, he met Huaixiang, who was also picking up clothes on the way. Huaixiang saw Changzi with disdain in his eyes. If it weren't for Shen Liangdi, the young lady wouldn't have been punished. Changzi also didn't like Huaixiang. Chang Liangyuan had bad intentions. The two of them were competing with each other. They were originally at normal speeds, but it turned into a competition. When they arrived at the clothing department, they were already panting. Huaixiang asked first, "Eunuch Hua, I'm here to get my young lady's clothes." Changzi followed closely, "Eunuch Hua, are my young lady's clothes ready?" Eunuch Hua glanced at the two people in front of him, and finally looked at Changzi, smiling and said, "Miss Changzi, it's ready, I'll have someone bring it over right away." Eunuch Hua ordered the eunuch to bring the clothes from the Hehuan palace. Huaixiang is not a fool. Eunuch Hua's attitude towards her is completely different from last time. She said with some dissatisfaction, "Eunuch Hua, where are my young master's clothes?" Eunuch Hua glanced at Huaixiang and his smile faded a little. "Miss Huaixiang, the clothes for Xinlan Palace have to wait for a few days. They are not ready yet." Eunuch Hua, my young master's clothes were obviously made first. Why are the clothes for Hehuan Palace ready, but my clothes have to wait for a few days? Eunuch Hua's face darkened. Miss Huaixiang has a bad memory. Miss Changzi came first last time, so naturally they should be made first. Changzi was a little surprised at first, but then she figured it out. The young master in Xinlan Palace was not made the crown princess, but was demoted to a concubine. Eunuch Hua really played his snobbishness to the extreme. But it was also a relief. The little eunuch took the new clothes and handed them to Changzi with both hands. Changzi took a quick look at them, took them, said a few polite words, and turned away. When she passed by Huaixiang, she snorted, turned around and walked away. Huaixiang was so angry. "Isn't your young master also a hen that doesn't lay eggs? What's so proud about it?" Huaixiang returned to Xinlan Palace with anger. As soon as she returned to Xinlan Palace, she saw concubine Su. No matter how annoying she was, she still had to do the surface work. She stepped forward and bowed, "Concubine Su." Concubine Su was a person who couldn't sit still. When she had time, she would go to Xinlan Palace with her handkerchief swung. "Where is Chang Liangyuan?" Huaixiang replied, "My young master is not feeling well and is resting." "Really?" Concubine Su walked away with her handkerchief swung. Huaixiang hurriedly stepped forward to stop her. "Concubine Su, my young master is really resting. Concubine Su will come to visit next time." Concubine Su had long been fed up with Huaixiang's bullying, and she shouted, "Caixia!" Caixia took 2 steps forward and held Huaixiang. Concubine Su then walked in and saw Chang Liangyuan sitting at the head of the bed. Compared with the previous few days, she was obviously more energetic. "Chang Liangyuan, why are you sick?" Chang Liangyuan knew clearly that Concubine Su must have come to see a joke. Her mouth was more annoying than a crow. "Concubine Su, why are you here?" Concubine Su adjusted the peony hairpin on her temples and said arrogantly, "Chang Liangyuan also knows that I am a concubine? I thought Chang Liangyuan had forgotten the rules because she was under house arrest." The implication was that Liangyuan had to salute when she saw a concubine. Chang Liangyuan paused. The palace was the place where rules and etiquette were most important. A higher position could crush people. She understood it better than anyone else. Even if she didn't want to get out of bed, she still lifted the quilt, put on her shoes, and saluted Concubine Su. Su looked at Chang Liangyuan bowing to her, feeling very proud. Chang Liangyuan invited the sisters to the ceremony 2 days ago. It's not that the sisters didn't give face, but the ceremony of conferring the crown princess was cancelled. What a pity. After saying that, she sighed. This matter was originally a scar in Chang Liangyuan's heart, and Su sprinkled salt on it, so she was naturally unhappy. Su, if there is nothing wrong, I want to rest. Su saw Chang Lianjiayuan's angry and sad look, and her purpose was achieved. Huaixiang said that you are not feeling well, so you should go see the imperial physician. After saying that, she walked out with a small handkerchief. Chang Liangyuan just breathed a sigh of relief. Concubine Su stopped again and said, "Remember to find imperial physician Zhao, he is one of us, and he is considerate." Chang Liangyuan trembled when she heard this. After concubine Su left, she was so angry that she cleared everything on the table and said viciously, "Concubine Su, who do you think you are? I have my family to support me, and the crown princess is still mine. I will see how I deal with you when the time comes." Asterisk. On the way back to the palace, Xiao Jinyan was suddenly attacked by an assassin. The assassin was very skilled in martial arts, and Wei Qi and Qin Xiao were both no match for him and were seriously injured. The assassin had a clear target, and the long sword pointed directly at Xiao Jinyan, and the speed was as fast as lightning, making it impossible for people to dodge. Xiao Jinyan barely avoided the long sword, but was injured by a hidden weapon. Wei Qi shouted, "Your Highness!" The assassin left quickly after he succeeded. Xiao Jinyan was quickly sent back to the East Palace and found Imperial Physician Wen for treatment. Dr. Wen tore open the clothes and saw black blood. Even the skin around the wound was black. His expression changed. "The hidden weapon is poisonous." Good evening, my dears. Now we update 3 chapters and 6,000 words every day. If there are many monthly votes and recommendation votes, we will add more. By the way, please give me monthly votes and recommendation votes. I love you. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 237. When Lu 11 and others heard that it was highly poisonous, they were so frightened that their legs weakened. Wei Qi held his stomach and shouted despite the pain, "Dr. Wen, please detoxify quickly." Dr. Wen frowned and began to clean the wound neatly to prevent the poison from spreading. At the same time, he said to Wei Qi, "The poison in your highness is very rare. I'm afraid it's difficult to cure." Only then did Lu 11 react and hurriedly ran out. Qin Xiao asked in confusion, "Eunuch Lu, where are you going?" "The Xie family will call a few more imperial doctors over. With more people, we can do more," Lu 11 said without looking back. As soon as Lu 11 ran out of the dormitory, he met Chun 11. Chengzi saw Lu 11's anxious expression and asked doubtfully, "Eunuch Lu, why are you so anxious?" "His Royal Highness has been attacked by an assassin. The Xie family is going to the Imperial Hospital now." Lu 11 finished speaking in one breath and ran away. Chengzi was stunned for a while, and after she came to her senses, she turned around and ran towards the Hehuan Hall. Little master, it's not good." Chengzi ran into the back room in one breath and said while panting, "Little master, something happened." Shen Chuwei ate mung bean cake, puffed out his cheeks and asked, "What happened?" Chengzi said anxiously, "His Royal Highness was assassinated. It seems that he was seriously injured." Shen Chuwei was stunned for a moment when he heard the words, and then ran out like a gust of wind. Chengzi felt a gust of wind blowing in front of her. When she looked again, Shen Chuwei had already run out, and she ran after her. Shen Chuwei ran all the way into Xiao Jinyan's bedroom and saw Wei Qi and Qin Xiao standing beside the bed, and Dr. Wen was treating wounds beside the bed. She walked over quickly and looked at Xiao Jinyan. His face was pale with a look of defeat, and his forehead was covered with big beads of sweat. Then his eyes fell on the wound. Even though Dr. Wen had treated the wound, black blood could still be seen flowing from the wound. At this time, Xiao Jinyan was on the verge of coma. When he heard Dr. Wen saying that the hidden weapon was highly poisonous, he sobered up a little. Seeing Shen Chuwei, he was stunned for a moment. He said weakly, "Why are you here?" Shen Chu said softly. Chengzi said that His Highness was assassinated, and I came here to have a look. Xiao Jinyan said feebly, there is Dr. Wen here, don't worry. Shen Chu turned slightly and told Chun 11, go get my medicine box and the water in the kettle. She took the water in the kettle from the space and was planning to boil it for tea. Slave, go now. Chengzi had just run over, but before she even had time to breathe, she turned around and ran out again. Shen Chuwei looked at Dr. Wen again. Dr. Wen, let me do it. Dr. Wen paused for a moment before raising his eyes to look at Shen Chuwei. How could a 15-year-old girl know how to deal with wounds, let alone one who was poisoned? Shen Liangdi, this is not a simple wound, it is not a joke. Shen Chu nodded slightly, I know. This, Dr. Wen was a little embarrassed. Shen Chuwei's beautiful eyes looked at Xiao Jinyan, Your Highness, let me come. Wei Qi sounded a little impatient because he was worried about his master's health. Shen Liangdi, His Highness is poisoned. You should wait aside. Xiao Jinyan angrily scolded, Wei Qi, who allowed you to speak to her like this? After saying that, he coughed several times, causing more black blood to flow out. Wei Qi knelt down on one knee, clasping his fists with both hands, Master, I don't dare. Xiao Jinyan slowed down and looked at Wei Qi and Qin Xiao, you all, retreat. Wei Qi and Qin Xiao looked at each other and retreated one after another. Dr. Wen hesitated for a while and then gave way. At this time, Chengzi took the medicine box and opened it. Shen Chuwei put on gloves neatly and took out the medical forceps and scalpel, which were all packed in sterile bags. She took it out of the space a few days ago for emergencies. After preparing everything, Shen Chuwei told Chengzi, feed His Highness some water. Okay. Chengzi picked up the kettle and poured some water, came to the bed, and carefully fed Xiao Jinyan little by little. Shen Chuwei first gave Xiao Jinyan local anesthesia, then disinfected it, and then removed the concealed weapon. The hidden weapon penetrated very deep, and it took Shen Chu a while to locate it. It was a very small marble with a tooth-like thing surrounding it. It was stuck in the flesh and was difficult to remove. Shen Chuwei could only use a scalpel to make a slit in the meat so that it could be easily taken out. Dr. Wen looked on, extremely nervous. Shen Chuwei successfully took out the concealed weapon and placed it on a plate aside, and then sutured the wound. Although the wound was not large, it healed faster after being sutured. Dr. Wen saw the hidden weapon. It didn't look big, but there were teeth-like things on it, making it difficult to take it out. He couldn't help but admire Shen Chuwei for being able to take out the hidden weapon so quickly. I also admire Xiao Jinyan for taking the concealed weapon without saying a word. He saw with his own eyes that Shen Chuwei used a knife to cut a slit in the flesh before taking out the hidden weapon. While suturing, Dr. Wen couldn't help but ask, Shen Liangdi, why did you sew it up with thread? Shen Chuwei answered concisely and to the point, it will get better quickly. Then came the bandaging. Xiao Jinyan kept gritting his teeth and waiting for the pain to hit, but after waiting for a long time, there was no pain at all. He couldn't help but wonder, why doesn't it hurt? Shen Chuwei explained, because I used local anesthesia, I will not feel the pain until the anesthetic wears off. Xiao Jinyan suddenly realized, no wonder he didn't feel any pain just now. Dr. Wen had never heard of local anesthesia. He was stunned for a while before he uttered 4 words, is it so magical? Shen Chuwei finished bandaging in a short while, and turned to look at Imperial Dr. Wen, it's okay. Lu 11 ran to the Imperial Hospital with a panting sound, and then ran back, dragging 2 Imperial doctors with grey beards behind him. The 2 old Imperial doctors were dragged by eunuch Lu all the way, their eyes rolled back, and they were out of breath, as if they would die in the next second. Lu 11 panted twice, you get out of the way, let the 2 Imperial doctors in. At this time, the door opened from the inside, and Imperial Dr. Wen saw the 2 old men in the Imperial Hospital and said, no need, The prince's injury has been treated. Finished. Lu 11 suspected that his ears were out of place, and he asked anxiously, Imperial Dr. Wen, didn't you just say that the prince was poisoned? It's healed in such a short time. Imperial Dr. Wen explained embarrassedly, Eunuch Lu, I misdiagnosed. Ah, Lu 11 panted and said, you scared me to death. Wei Qi and Qin Xiao looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. Dr. Wen came over, you are also injured, I will take a look at you. Knowing that the master is fine, Wei Qi relaxed and held his stomach and cried, it hurts. Qin Xiao also felt the pain and frowned. In the bedroom, Shen Chuwei held water in her hand and fed Xiao Jinyan sip by sip. Although it was only local anesthesia, Xiao Jinyan was a little tired at this time, but Xiao Ju kept feeding him water, which made him a little puzzled. My dears, add another chapter. Please vote. In the comment area, there is a post with a cat that looks like Swichuan. My dears, can you go and take a look? The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 238. Xiao Jinyan said with difficulty, Xiaju, I'm not thirsty anymore. You have to drink even if you're not thirsty. Shen Chuwei continued to feed Xiao Jinyan with a small spoon. Xiao Jinyan just wanted to rest for a while, but he felt helpless when he saw her still feeding him water persistently. I would like to take a rest. Shen Chu made a small movement of feeding water and saw that Xiao Jinyan's double eyelids were very deep, which was caused by extreme sleepiness. Your Highness, let's drink a few more sips and then sleep, okay? She was afraid that drinking too much spiritual spring water would not be enough to detoxify her body. What can Xiao Jinyan say? Of course it depends on her. Good. Shen Chu frowned slightly and continued to feed Xiao Jinyan water. After a few sips, he stopped feeding him. Your Highness, please rest. Yes, Xiao Jinyan closed his eyes and fell asleep soon after. Because he used local anesthesia, he felt no pain and fell asleep easily. Shen Chuwei put down the teacup in his hand and looked down at Xiao Jinyan's handsome face. His face was still pale, which was caused by excessive blood loss and poisoning. But the gray and defeated look has disappeared. She took out Xiao Jinyan's hand anxiously and put 2 fingers on her wrist to check for pulse. After making sure she was fine, she put her hands back under the quilt and covered her up, continuing to stare at Xiao Jinyan's handsome face. Being a prince is too dangerous. If I had been a little late, you would have lost your life. At this time, Xiao Jinyan was sleeping very deeply and did not hear Shen Chuwei's words. Shen Chuwei stared at Xiao Jinyan for a long time. Lu 11 opened the door and walked in. He saw Shen Chuwei guarding the bedside. He walked over quietly and saw that His Highness had fallen asleep, and his face looked better than before. He then breathed a sigh of relief and said, His Royal Highness, Jiren has his own destiny. Fortunately, everything is fine. Shen Chuwei immediately took a bag of medicine from the medicine box and handed it to Lu 11, and ordered, Eunuch Lu, please ask the kitchen to stew some black fish soup, and drink some when His Highness wakes up. Lu 11 was a cautious person. He looked at the medicine bag in his hand and asked Shen Chuwei, Shen Liangdi, what kind of medicine is this? Shen Chu said slightly, medicine that can speed up wound healing. Blackfish originally has the effect of healing wounds, and the medicine she prepared can improve the healing effect. When Lu 11 heard this, he said no more, took the medicine bag, turned around and went out, ordering people to make soup. Shen Chuwei was once again left alone in the room guarding Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan wouldn't wake up for a while, and she felt sleepy waiting. His eyes looked at the ink-colored hair on the pillow, which was very long. She suddenly thought of a way to relieve her fatigue. Shen Chu moved his body slightly, moved closer to the pillow, stretched out his slender fingers to pick up a strand of hair, divided it into 3 strands, and began to braid it skillfully. After braiding one piece, pick up a strand of hair and continue braiding it. With work to do, Shen Shuwei no longer felt sleepy, but felt a little excited. Looking at the braids, Shen Shuwei felt a sense of accomplishment. When Lu 11 came in again, he was stunned when he saw dozens of braids. No, he was frightened. Shen Liangdi, how do you braid His Highness? After being reminded by Lu 11, Shen Chu discovered that he had braided at least 10 braids. The long braids were piled up together. Not to mention, they looked pretty good. It's a bit like the hairstyle of a man on the prairie. At this time, Xiao Jinyan slowly woke up. An ordinary person would not be able to wake up from this. Xiao Jinyan subconsciously wanted to wake up. Shen Shuwei was the first to notice that Xiao Jinyan had woken up. Your Highness, are you awake? Xiao Jinyan said feebly. Shen Shuwei asked again, how do you feel, Your Highness? Does the wound hurt? Xiao Jinyan said, the wound hurts a little, but it's bearable. My servant will ask someone to bring the soup over. Lu 11 breathed a sigh of relief when he saw His Highness woke up, turned around and walked out quickly. Xiao Jinyan struggled to get up. Seeing this, Shen Shuwei hurriedly stepped forward and held him down. Your Highness, you'd better lie down. Xiao Jinyan said nonchalantly, Xiaju, this injury is nothing. He held the bed with his hand and touched something bumpy and silky. When he looked down, he saw dozens of braids hanging down on his body. There was a man with braided hair. His face darkened at first, and then he felt a little uncomfortable. Shen Shuwei was embarrassed and hurriedly stretched out his hand to untie the braid, and explained at the same time, Your Highness, I was sleepy just now, so I braided the braid for Your Highness. As a result, I was in a hurry and it took me a long time to untie one. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes to look at Shen Shuwei's actions, held the hand, raised his eyes to look at her, and softly uttered 2 words, no problem. Shen Chu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She was scared to death just now and thought Xiao Jinyan was angry. She arched her eyebrows and blew a rainbow fart. His Highness is unparalleled in beauty. Even with his braided hair, he is unmatched. Xiao Jinyan's serious face was so easily amused by Shen Shuwei's rainbow fart. Then he turned away again. How can a man braid his hair? Shen Shuwei nodded cooperatively, I don't understand the rules and etiquette. Xiao Jinyan sat up with Shen Shuwei's help, and she brought 2 soft pillows to cushion Xiao Jinyan's back. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shuwei with a pale face, thinking that just now she had taken a hidden weapon to bandage her wound. Before she came, Dr. Wen said it was highly poisonous, but she easily cured it. Dr. Wen is not a person who likes to exaggerate. If he can say that the poison is extremely poisonous and difficult to cure, then it must be true. He opened his mouth and said, thanks to you today. Shen Shuwei approached Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan looked at the person who suddenly came over, and subconsciously thought that she was kissing him. Although he was not in good condition now, kissing was still okay. Just when Xiao Jinyan was full of expectations, he heard Shen Shuwei say, Your Highness, can I move back to Xiun Pavilion? The chicks are about to hatch, and she really wants to go back and see. But Hehuan is really far from Xiun Pavilion, and she is a lazy bone and really doesn't like running back and forth. Xiao Jinyan's expectations are exchanged for this sentence, of course not, directly rejected, no. Shen Shuwei was not discouraged by the rejection, then I will ask next time. Xiao Jinyan. Even if you ask 100 times, I will not agree. Lu 11 brought the black fish soup and handed it directly to Shen Shuwei. Shen Liangdi, you feed Your Highness. Shen Shuwei had no right to refuse, nor did she want to refuse. Okay. She took the bowl from Lu 11, picked up the white porcelain spoon and stirred it in the bowl and let it cool for a while. Xiao Jinyan looked at her actions calmly, carefully scooped up a spoonful of soup, blew it to his lips, and then brought it to his own mouth. How could Xiao Jinyan be fed like this before? He was a little uncomfortable for a while. He opened his mouth mechanically and held the spoon, and drank the black fish soup. Shen Shuwei scooped another spoonful, and repeated the action of blowing it cool and bringing it to his mouth. After drinking a few mouthfuls, Xiao Jinyan gradually got used to it. In this way, a bowl of black fish soup was finished. Shen Shuwei took out a handkerchief and wiped the soup that accidentally overflowed from Xiao Jinyan's mouth, with gentle movements. Xiao Jinyan was stunned for a long time. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 239. Xiao Jinyan was stunned for a long time. Maybe it was because he hadn't been treated with such care and gentleness for so long that he felt a little unreal. Shen Shuwei purely treated Xiao Jinyan as a patient. Whether he was an adult or a child, he still wanted to be taken care of carefully when he was sick or injured. Your Highness, please sleep a little longer. Xiao Jinyan shook his head. I don't want to sleep now. Shen Shuwei kindly reminded, Your Highness, rest will help the wound recover. Xiao Jinyan, I know. At this time, Eunuch Ren's shrill voice came from outside the door, the queen is here. Shen Shuwei stood up to greet her, may the queen be blessed with peace and happiness. Xiao Jinyan was about to get out of bed, but the queen stopped him, if you are injured, just lie down and the courtesy will be waived. Xiao Jinyan put down the quilt in his hand and lay back on the soft pillow, thank you, Queen Mother. Eunuch Ren brought a chair. The queen sat down on the chair and looked at Xiao Jinyan with her beautiful eyes. She looked at him for a few times and found that his face was pale, his clothes were intact, and he couldn't see any injuries. I heard that you were assassinated on the way to the palace. How were your injuries? Is it important? Xiao Jinyan said, thank you very much, Queen Mother, for your concern. My son is fine now. That's good. Now the assassins are too rampant. People are rushing to assassinate the prince near the palace. The queen was furious, and she asked, can the assassin be caught? He must be killed by the 9 tribes. Xiao Jinyan shook his head, after returning to my mother, the assassin's martial arts are extremely high, but my son's skills are not as good as others, so I let him run away. Xiao Jinyan was not being modest. The assassin came prepared, and his martial arts skills were superior to his, and his lightness kung fu was excellent. He was lucky to have escaped. I don't know who sent him. The queen thought about it and could only guess at the other princes. After all, everyone was jealous of the position of prince. Before leaving, she asked, be careful when you travel, don't let anyone with bad intentions succeed. The queen did not stay long and returned to Fenji Palace. It is said that it takes 30 years to reach Hedong and 30 years to reach Hexi. This sentence is not true at all. Last time she couldn't eat this or that because she was injured. This time, Shen Shuwei held the bowl and ate meat and ribs in front of Xiao Jinyan. What Xiao Jinyan drank was still black fish soup. The clear soup was watery and had no taste at all. Xiao Jinyan, who had never been interested in eating, couldn't bear to eat any more, especially when there was a foodie opposite who was devouring his food. He looked like he was eating some delicious food. Xiao Jinyan was actually greedy for the way she was eating. He coughed lightly, Xiaju, give me a piece of braised pork ribs. Shen Shuwei said seriously, Your Highness, you are seriously injured. You cannot eat greasy food or eat with salt. It is not conducive to the recovery of the wound. This is to translate Xiao Jinyan's original words and return them to Xiao Jinyan. After saying that, she lowered her head and took a bite of the ribs, which tasted particularly delicious. Xiao Jinyan only drank some porridge for breakfast, and then only drank a bowl of black fish soup for dinner. Seeing her eating with gusto, he suddenly wanted to try the braised pork ribs. I'll eat a piece, it'll be fine. Shen Shuwei said again, Your Highness, you are an adult now. You must have self-control. When the injury is healed, we can eat braised pork ribs again. Xiao Jinyan finally figured out that Shen Shuwei did this on purpose. He picked up the black fish soup in front of him, put it to his mouth and took a sip. How could a soup without salt be so good? Xiao Jinyan drank a bowl of black fish soup and didn't want to drink it anymore. But when he saw Shen Shuwei eating, he felt very hungry. He wants to eat. Xiaju, I want to eat. Okay, Shen Shuwei didn't refuse. She took a clean bowl and gave Xiao Jinyan a bowl of rice. She really only gave him a bowl of rice. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the rice in front of him, then raised his eyes to look at the pile of ribs in Shen Shuwei's bowl. Xiaoju, how can I eat without food? There was some hesitation. These dishes are too greasy and contain soy sauce, which will leave scars. Xiao Jinyan said nonchalantly, I am a man, so what if I have scars? Then you can only eat one piece of braised pork ribs. Shen Shuwei put a piece of braised pork ribs into Xiao Jinyan's bowl. Xiao Jinyan didn't expect that he would fall to this point. But he didn't care. He picked up the piece of ribs and put it into his mouth, took a small bite, and then grabbed the rice. I was satisfied with a piece of ribs and half a bowl of rice. Xiao Jinyan couldn't take a bath because of his injury. Shen Shuwei realized this and planned to find an excuse to escape. Your Highness, it's getting late, I'll go back soon. Xiao Jinyan said, I won't go back tonight. Shen Shuwei couldn't go back after hearing this, so what could happen? His Highness is injured, and I am not sleeping well. What if I touch His Highness's wound? Shen Shuwei said in a tone of I am thinking about you. Xiao Jinyan, it's okay, I'm a little sweaty. Shen Shuwei heard the words and looked at Lu 11 hurriedly, Eunuch Lu, please help His Highness. Take a bath. Where did Eunuch Lu go? She had clearly seen Lu 11 standing here just now, but suddenly he disappeared. Xiao Jinyan kindly reminded, Lu 11 has withdrawn. Shen Shuwei, I know. Xiao Jinyan ordered, it's inconvenient to take a bath, so wipe yourself instead. Shen Chu breathed a sigh of relief and asked again, is there any difference between wiping the body and bathing? The hot water was prepared by Lu Zixi after he left, and he left after it was ready. The job of waiting and wiping the body naturally fell into Shen Shuwei's hands. Xiao Jinyan sat still, but his eyes fell on Shen Shuwei, watching her walk towards him, stand in front of him, and undress him. Shen Shuwei was not nervous about undressing Xiao Jinyan, but about taking off all her clothes, yes, not a single piece left. Then she wiped her body with a towel, still a little embarrassed. Especially when the lights were on. Unlike when serving the emperor in bed, with the bed curtains drawn, the light inside was dim. Even if she felt embarrassed, she could still nestle in his arms and not see. Xiao Jinyan kindly reminded, if you keep dawdling, the water will get cold. No way. Shen Shuwei took off her shirt and looked at his abdominal muscles. She had seen them several times and touched them. They felt firm. Still couldn't help but sigh, he had a great figure. She dipped a towel in hot water and gently wiped his body. In addition to the hidden weapon, there were other injuries on his upper body, which were not serious in comparison. Xiao Jinyan didn't have to move his limbs. He cooperated with Shen Shuwei, sitting up when he should and raising his hands when he should. The two of them were so close that Xiao Jinyan could smell the faint sweet peach fragrance on her body, which made his Adam's apple roll up and down. He quickly wiped the upper body, and then the lower body, but it was not so easy. Shen Shuwei untied the belt, and pulled it off with a determined heart. Xiao Jinyan saw her blushing cheeks, and hurriedly turned around to get a towel, dipped it in hot water, and turned back again. Their eyes met. Good night. My dears. Acting cute and begging for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 240. Shen Shuwei blushed, her beautiful eyes were full of shyness. Xiao Jinyan saw it, and couldn't help but reach out and grab her wrist, bringing her into his arms. Shen Shuwei really didn't expect that a wounded person would suddenly attack, and she was caught off guard and bumped into him. She raised her little face and looked at Xiao Jinyan in confusion. "Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan whispered in her ear, "I just took off my outer pants, why is Xiaju blushing?" Shen Shuwei touched her face, it was hot, even if she couldn't see it, she guessed that it was red. She said confidently, "I am shy, a normal reaction for girls." Xiao Jinyan laughed softly, "But we are already husband and wife." Husband and wife. The two were too close, and Shen Shuwei's face was very hot. Xiao Jinyan saw that Shen Shuwei's ears were red, and he said lightly, "Xiaju, continue." Shen Shuwei could see that Xiao Jinyan was doing it on purpose. Feng Shui turns around, and turns around, and it turns to me again. Shen Shuwei made up her mind and continued the unfinished task just now. The task was difficult, and she finished it with a red face throughout the whole process. When she finished, her face was as red as a cooked shrimp. Xiao Jinyan was naturally not much better. He originally wanted to tease Xiaoju, but he was the one who suffered in the end. After Shen Shuwei finished bathing, she wanted to go back to the Hehuan Palace next door to sleep. She still knew her sleeping posture, and it was easy to accidentally hurt her bedmate. Xiao Jinyan naturally disagreed. "I was injured, shouldn't you serve me personally? You are the prince, you have the final say." Shen Shuwei climbed onto the bed, lifted the quilt and lay in, then moved her body to keep a safe distance from Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan looked at her sideways. Shen Shuwei explained, "Your Highness is injured, so you'd better pay attention to it." Xiao Jinyan nodded, "Yeah." The next day, when Shen Shuwei woke up, she found herself hugging Xiao Jinyan's arm. Xiao Jinyan's slightly hoarse voice came from above her head, "Are you awake?" Shen Shuwei raised her little face and curved her eyebrows, "Your Highness, good morning." Xiao Jinyan asked, "Did you sleep well last night?" "I slept well." Shen Shuwei has always had a good sleep, the kind that can't wake up even if there is thunder in the middle of the night. Xiao Jinyan, "I slept well, too." The fact shows that as long as the injury is not on the right side, there is no problem for the two to sleep in the same bed. After Shen Shuwei got up, Xiao Jinyan silently retracted his arm and kept it still all night, and his whole arm was numb. At breakfast, Shen Shuwei was filled with various breakfasts. Xiao Jinyan only had a bowl of porridge in front of him, without even a side dish. Xiao Jinyan didn't dislike it, because he only drank some porridge and ate some breakfast every day. However, when he looked up and saw Shen Shuwei eating snacks, his indifferent thoughts just now were thrown out of his mind. Steamed buns, dumplings, etc., look delicious. "Xiaju, I want to eat meat buns." Shen Shuwei stuffed a bun in her mouth and said vaguely, "Your Highness, meat buns are too greasy, you can't eat them." Xiao Jinyan compromised, "I will only eat one dumpling." "No, dumplings are fried food, you can't eat them." Shen Shuwei said, picked up the snacks on the plate in front of her, turned her back to him and continued to eat on the table. Xiao Jinyan glanced at Shen Shuwei's back, lowered his head and looked at the porridge in front of him, and could only look forward to lunch. At lunch, the palace maids served lunch one after another. Shen Shuwei looked at the delicious food in front of him, and his appetite was aroused. He picked up the chopsticks, thought for a moment, looked up at Xiao Jinyan at the next table, and found that he was looking at him, with curved eyebrows. "Your Highness, eat." In front of Xiao Jinyan was a bowl of rice, 3 dishes, and a soup, which were lacking in color, fragrance, and taste. He lost his appetite at a glance. He looked at Shen Shuwei at the next table. The dishes in front of her were all delicious. Why eat at separate tables? Shen Shuwei said confidently, even if your highness is an adult, there are times when he can't control himself. There will be no such troubles if we eat separately. Xiao Jinyan. Lu 11, who was standing by and waiting, secretly wiped a cold sweat. Shen Liangdi was getting bolder and bolder. She actually treated his highness like this. Xiao Jinyan glanced at Lu 11, you are not brave? She said to eat separately, so she separated? Lu 11 instructed the maid to make a clear division of labor for Shen Shuwei's suggestion. Concubine Su came to Hehuan Palace, but didn't see Shen Shuwei. She asked Little Rabbit and found out that Shen Shuwei was in the next bedroom. This happened for 3 consecutive days. Concubine Su couldn't sit still anymore and walked into the prince's bedroom with a handkerchief. As soon as she came in, she saw Shen Shuwei feeding Xiao Jinyan a piece of cake. She didn't see clearly what cake it was, but she saw clearly that Xiao Jinyan ordered Shen Shuwei. Shen Shuwei was eating the cakes by herself. Thinking that Xiao Jinyan didn't eat much for lunch, she fed him a bite of cakes and asked casually, Your Highness, how does it taste? Xiao Jinyan chewed slowly and nodded, not bad. Concubine Su swung her handkerchief and stepped forward a few steps to bow, Your Highness, may you be blessed and safe. Xiao Jinyan raised her eyes and glanced at Concubine Su, her voice cold and distant, Concubine Su, is there anything? Concubine Su replied, I heard that your highness was injured, so I came to see him. But in her heart, she was complaining that there were so many people serving in the bedroom, and Shen Shuwei had to serve him personally, which was too bullying. Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei looked at the cakes that Xiao Jinyan had left in her hand and handed them to Xiao Jinyan again, Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan opened his mouth and took the remaining cake into his mouth. He chewed it twice, but before he could swallow it, he heard Concubine Su complaining. You need to be fed a cake. You are not a child anymore. Xiao Jinyan. Can you get out of here quickly? Shen Shuwei ate the mung bean cake and raised her eyes to ask Concubine Su, does Concubine Su want to eat cake? Okay. Concubine Su took 2 steps forward, picked up a piece of mung bean cake, put it in her mouth and took a bite. There were sesame seeds inside, and the sweetness was just right. It's delicious. After saying that, she stuffed the remaining half of the mung bean cake into her mouth. I asked Chengzi to make it specially. Shen Shuwei was a little proud. Chengzi made it according to her taste, so of course it was delicious. Concubine Su picked up another piece of mung bean cake and looked up at Xiao Jinyan, who didn't look injured. Your Highness, are you healed? Xiao Jinyan said lightly, Concubine Su is thoughtful. I am fine now. Concubine Su snorted in her heart. She was fine but still occupied Shen Shuwei. She also needed freedom and her own space. The need for freedom and space is from novels. She learned it by flexibly, which shows that Concubine Su is still very smart. Xiao Jinyan's face darkened and turned to look at Shen Shuwei. She was eating mung bean cake with relish. Shen Liangdi, accompany me for a walk. Okay. Shen Shuwei stood up and took a piece of mung bean cake in one hand. Xiao Jinyan. I can't forget to eat at any time. Concubine Su curled her lips in dissatisfaction when she saw this. Isn't it just going out for a walk? What does Lu 11 do? Is he a decoration? My dears, good evening. I'm acting cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets.